The air over Manhattan felt tight that day. A crowd filled the street near a big glass building with bright screens. Some people held signs. Some people held phones. Police lines tried to keep the shouting from turning into a fight. Jade Parker kept her hood up and her head down. She was 16. She was a mutant. She had learned that those two facts could get you hurt. Her power was small, but obvious. When she got scared, the lights around her flickered. Street lamps blinked. Phone screens flashed. It was like her fear could leak into wires. A man in a suit noticed. "Hey," he called, loud enough for the people around him to hear. "Your little trick. Do it again." Jade kept walking. Another voice snapped back. "Leave the kid alone." The first man turned. "Mutant sympathizer." Jade's stomach dropped. She felt the lights above her pulse once, twice. A few phones died. Someone cursed. People looked at her now. Then the sky tore open. It was not like lightning. It was not like a portal from a comic book. It was a hard, black crack in the air, like someone split the world with a blade. Wind pushed down from it. Dust rolled along the street. Jade stopped without meaning to. Everyone did. Something fell out of the tear and did not fall like a person. It dropped like a heavy statue, slow and sure, and then it landed with a sound that made the sidewalk jump. A tall figure stood up. It was a skeleton. Not a Halloween toy, not a costume. Real bone, a crown. A long black robe with gold and red details. 2 points of red light burned where eyes should be. People screamed. Phones rose higher. A few people ran. A few froze. The skeleton turned its head in calm, clean movements, like a king looking over a room. Jade could not move. Her hands shook. Her power flickered again. The street lights stuttered. The skeleton's red eyes swung to her. Not hungry, not angry, just focused. Then a deep voice spoke, smooth and controlled. "State your location." Jade's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Before anyone could answer, the sound of metal thunder rolled down the street. A shadow passed over the crowd. Jade looked up and saw a shape like a giant man made of gray armor. A sentinel. Its chest light glowed. Its hands opened like claws. Somebody shouted, "Get down!" The sentinel fired. A beam cut across the street toward the crowd. Jade saw it coming and knew she would not move in time. Then the world stopped. Not like a pause in a video. Like time itself held its breath. The beam froze in the air, a bright line stuck in place. Dust hung like tiny stars. A man's shout froze with his mouth open. Jade blinked. She could still move. Her heart still beat. Her breath still came out, loud in the sudden quiet. The skeleton moved, too. It stepped through the frozen street with steady steps. It passed people like they were statues. It reached Jade and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Then it walked, fast but calm, carrying her away from the beam line. It set her behind a parked car. Jade's mind spun. "How?" The skeleton did not answer. It looked back at the beam and the crowd like it was checking a board with pieces. Its hand rose. Time snapped back. Sound exploded at once. Screams returned. The beam finished its path, but now it hit empty street. The sentinel's head turned, searching. The skeleton raised one finger, like a teacher about to correct a student. A thin, clean slice of darkness cut through the sentinel's arm. The metal did not bend. It simply split, smooth, as if it had been cut by something sharper than a sword. The sentinel stumbled. The skeleton spoke a single word, quiet but heavy. Silence. A wave pressed out from it. Not a blast. Not fire. More like the air itself became heavier. The crowd's panic did not vanish, but it slowed. People still ran, but they ran with a little more space between them, like their bodies had remembered to breathe. The sentinel tried to fire again. The skeleton's hand opened. A wall of pale bone rose from the street, fast and tall, blocking the shot. The beam struck the bone wall and burned a line across it. The wall held. Jade stared, shaking. This was not a mutant power she had ever seen. Someone landed on the street with a gust of wind. Storm. Aurora Monroe stood with her white hair lifting in the air. Her eyes were sharp, her face calm, in a way that could cut through fear. Another shape dropped from above, lower and faster. Wolverine. Logan hit the pavement like a heavy punch. His claws slid out with a metal click. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at the skeleton. Storm's voice carried, clear and firm. "Everyone, move back. Now." Wolverine stepped forward. "You," he growled at the skeleton. "What the hell are you?" The skeleton turned toward them. For a moment, Jade thought it might attack, but it did not. It stood still like a throne had grown legs. "Identify yourselves," the skeleton said. "This territory is unknown to me." Storm kept her hands open. She did not lower her guard, but she did not strike. "I am Aurora Monroe," she said. "Storm, you are on Earth, in New York City." Wolverine sniffed the air, eyes narrowed. "And you smell like a grave." The skeleton's red eyes did not flicker. "I am Ainz Ooal. That name meant nothing to Jade, but the way he said it made it sound like it should mean everything. Storm's gaze stayed steady. "Ainz Ooal. That sentinel was attacking civilians. You stopped it." "I stopped disorder," Ainz said. "The civilians were assets in the area." Wolverine's lip curled. "Assets. Nice." Ainz looked past them, up at the sky tear, which was shrinking now like a closing wound. "I require answers," he said, "and I require stability." Storm took a slow breath. "Then we should talk somewhere safer." Wolverine kept his claws out. "Yeah. Somewhere with thick walls." Far away, in a quiet room with a curved chair and a calm mind, Charles Xavier felt the moment like a cold touch on his forehead. He reached out with his telepathy, careful. He did not push hard. He did not pry. He simply knocked, the way you knock on a door. What he felt back was not a normal mind. It was like standing in front of a locked castle made of dark stone. It was vast. It was ordered. And behind it, there was a silence that did not feel empty. It felt guarded. Xavier opened his eyes and whispered to himself, "Who are you?" And then, softer, because the answer scared him a little, "What have we just brought into our world?" Scott Summers watched the black car pull through the gates with tight shoulders. The mansion looked peaceful on the outside. Green lawn, trees, old stone. Like a place where nothing bad could happen. Scott knew better. Bad things loved quiet places. Storm got out first. Wolverine followed. Between them walked the newcomer. Ainz Ooal moved like he belonged in a throne room, not on a driveway. His robe did not drag in mud. His steps did not rush. He did not look around like a lost tourist. He looked around like a ruler counting exits. Scott kept his visor down. He kept his voice controlled. "You're in a private school," Scott said. "It's called Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters." Ainz turned his skull toward him. "A school. It's also a base," Wolverine said. "So don't get any ideas." Storm shot Logan a warning look. "Logan." Scott did not argue. Logan's suspicion was useful. It kept people alive. The front doors opened. Professor Xavier waited inside, sitting in his chair. His face was calm, but his eyes studied every detail. Scott saw Ainz's red lights shift to Xavier. For the first time since the street, Scott felt something like pressure in the room. Not wind, not heat. Authority. Two leaders measuring each other. "Welcome," Xavier said. His voice was gentle. "I am Charles Xavier." Ainz paused. then dipped his head slightly. Not a bow, but a nod, like he was choosing respect. Charles Xavier, Ainz repeated. You command this territory? Xavier smiled just a little. I guide it. Please. Come in. They led Ainz through the halls. Students watched from doorways. Some looked curious. Some looked afraid. Ainz noticed every stare. Scott could tell. The skeleton's head turned just enough to track them, like a camera that never blinked. Beast waited in the lab. Hank McCoy had a tablet in hand and a careful look on his face. His curiosity was bright, but he held it back behind manners. Fascinating, Hank said, then cleared his throat. Welcome. I'm Dr. McCoy. Beast. Ainz looked at him. A beast who speaks. Hank's mouth twitched. Yes, it's a long story. Scott didn't like how normal the talk was becoming. Normal made people forget danger. He stood near the door. Jean Grey stood near Xavier, quiet. Her eyes stayed on Ainz, but not like she was staring at bones, like she was listening for something. Xavier gestured to a chair. Please sit. Ainz did not sit. I do not sit in unknown territory, Ainz said. Wolverine snorted. Smart. Scott's jaw tightened. This is a test. You want stability. You start by showing you can follow rules. Ainz's red eyes fixed on Scott. Scott felt sweat prick under his collar. He had stared down gods and monsters before, but this felt different. It felt like looking at a storm that could decide to happen. Then Ainz moved. A chair slid across the floor by itself, smooth and quiet, and stopped behind him. Ainz lowered into it with perfect control. Scott exhaled once. He didn't like that Ainz had made it clear the chair only happened because Ainz allowed it. Xavier folded his hands. Thank you. We want to understand what happened, how you arrived, and what you intend to do now. Ainz's skull tilted. Intent is shaped by threat and opportunity. Hank's eyebrows rose. Direct. Wolverine muttered. Told you. Xavier stayed calm. Tell us what you can, in simple terms. Ainz was silent for a moment. Scott could almost see him deciding what mask to wear. My origin is not from this world, Ainz said. I was ruling. I was responsible for a large domain and those within it. Then I crossed a boundary I did not plan to cross. Storm asked, Did you come alone? Ainz's red eyes dimmed for a split second, then returned. I arrived alone, he said. Jean's voice was soft. That matters to you. Ainz did not answer her directly. I require information, the nature of this world, the power structure, the rules, the threats. Scott said, And in exchange? Ainz looked at him again. In exchange, I will not destabilize your territory unless provoked. Wolverine barked a humorless laugh. Great deal. I won't burn your house down unless you make me. Scott held up a hand. Logan. Not helping. It is helping, Logan said. He needs to hear it. Xavier leaned forward slightly. Ainz. In this world, mutants are feared. Machines like the one you fought are built to capture or kill us. Ainz processed that. Your kind are hunted. Storm's voice held steel under calm. Yes. Ainz's fingers tapped the arm of the chair once. Then you exist in constant conflict. Scott said, We exist in constant pressure. We try to protect people anyway. Ainz's gaze shifted toward the hallway, where students had been watching. He saw fear. He saw curiosity. He saw young faces. He spoke like he was stating a fact for a report. Your faction shelters the young. Hank tried to keep things steady. We do. Ainz's voice stayed even. Then you understand the need for security. Scott didn't like where that was going. Security is not the same as control. Ainz turned back to him. In my experience, it often is. A beat of silence. Xavier gently changed the angle. May I ask, what are you? Wolverine's grin showed teeth. Yeah. What are you? You ain't a mutant. Ainz lifted one hand, palm up, like he was presenting an answer that should be obvious. I am undead, he said. A sorcerer. A ruler. Hank's eyes widened. Undead? That would explain some of the readings. Scott snapped his eyes to Hank. Readings? Hank held up the tablet. I ran passive scans when he entered the property. There's no heartbeat, no breathing, no body heat the way humans have it. Yet he moves, speaks, reacts. Storm's eyes narrowed. Magic. Illyana Rasputin stepped into the lab doorway like she had been there the whole time. Magic. Her blonde hair was tied back. Her sword was not in her hands, but Scott knew it was never far. Not like my kind of magic, Illyana said. But it's magic. Ainz's red eyes locked on her. A portal user, Ainz said. Illyana's smile was sharp. A portal user. Scott didn't miss that. Ainz was labeling them, sorting them, like pieces. Xavier said, We need trust, Ainz. Even a little. Ainz's voice became softer, not kinder, but less heavy. Trust is built through structure. He lifted his hand again. A thin sheet of black appeared in the air like a floating paper. Symbols moved on it, glowing. Then the symbols shifted into simple shapes the others could recognize. Lines, boxes, marks like a list. Hank leaned in, amazed. He's translating, on the fly. Ainz spoke, calm. You are a group with roles. The glowing sheet showed boxes as he spoke, like a chart. The leader, he said, and one box highlighted near Xavier. The commander, he added, and another box highlighted near Scott. The storm weapon, he said, and Storm's box lit. The close combat striker, he said, and Wolverine's box lit. The scholar, he said, and Hank's box lit. The portal specialist, he said, and Illyana's box lit. Wolverine stared. Storm weapon? Seriously? Storm's mouth pressed into a line. He isn't wrong. Ainz nodded once, like he had completed a task. This structure can be used for efficiency. Scott felt his patience thin. We are not your army. Ainz looked at him. Not yet. The room went colder in Scott's mind, even if the air did not change. Jean shifted her stance. Her voice stayed calm, but her warning was real. Watch your words. Ainz turned his skull to her. Telepath. Jean's eyes widened just slightly. Yes. I felt your touch earlier, Ainz said. It was polite. But it was still an intrusion. Xavier's face stayed gentle. I apologize. I did it to prevent harm. Ainz held Xavier's gaze. Then we share a motive. Prevention. Scott spoke before the moment got too smooth. Here are our rules, he counted on his fingers. 1. No harming civilians. Ever. Ainz did not react. 2. No raising the dead. No undead army. Not here. Ainz's red eyes flickered. Interesting. 3. No mind control. Jean looked at Scott but didn't argue. She understood why he said it. 4. If you leave this property, you do it with one of us, at least until we know what you are. Wolverine muttered. And even then, Scott finished. Agree, or you leave. Ainz sat still. Too still. Hank's mind raced through ways this could go wrong. Scott could see it on his face. Storm kept her expression calm. But Scott knew she was ready to call lightning if she had to. Illyana's eyes stayed hard, like she was waiting to cut open a door to get everyone out. Xavier waited, patient, steady, like he was offering a hand to someone standing at the edge of a cliff. Ainz finally spoke. I will not harm civilians without cause, Ainz said. Scott's voice sharpened. No without cause. No harm. Ainz paused. Then, in a small shift that felt like a choice, he said, I will not harm civilians, under this agreement. Good, Scott said. Ainz continued. I will avoid the creation of undead within your territory. Wolverine's eyebrows lifted. Avoid. Scott's tone went flat. No. Ainz's skull turned toward Scott like a slow blade. Commander, Ainz said, and Scott hated the label. You ask a ruler to discard tools. Scott didn't blink. Yes. Because those tools will make this world burn faster. If you want stability, you listen. Ainz sat in silence again. Then he said, Agreed. No undead creation within your territory, unless the survival of this territory is at stake. Scott almost argued again. Xavier's hand lifted slightly. Scott knew what that meant. Not approval, a choice. Xavier was balancing safety and reality. Scott swallowed the frustration. Fine. We will define at stake later. Ainz nodded once. Acceptable. Hank cleared his throat. If we can continue, I'd like to... Wolverine cut in. No poking the Bone King with needles. Hank's ears flicked. I was going to say, ask questions. Ainz's red eyes tilted toward Wolverine. You are hostile? Wolverine shrugged. I'm honest. Ainz considered that. Honesty is useful. That was the first time Scott saw something almost like respect in Ainz's posture. It didn't make Scott relax. It made him more worried, because Ainz wasn't acting like a wild monster. He was acting like a man building a map. Later, Scott walked the upper hallway and watched through a window as Ainz stood in the training room below. Not the danger room, just an empty space with padded walls. Storm stood at one end. Wolverine leaned against a wall, arms crossed. Beast watched with sensors. John stood close to Xavier, who sat quietly. Ainz looked around the room and said, Demonstration requested. Storm nodded. Controlled. No lethal force. Ainz's skull turned. Lethal is efficient. Wolverine grunted. Yeah, that's the problem. Ainz lifted his hand and traced a small circle in the air. A barrier appeared. It was clear like thick glass, but it shimmered with faint gold lines. Hank spoke softly, like he was afraid to disturb it. That's not a simple force field. It has layers. Storm tested it with a small gust of wind. The barrier did not move. John reached out with her mind. Careful. She felt the surface like touching a wall that had rules, not emotion. Rules. Scott watched Ainz's hand. It did not shake. Ainz said, This barrier can be moved. It can be shaped. The barrier split into 3 panels, then rotated, then stacked like a shield wall. Storm's eyes narrowed. So you can protect people. Ainz replied, Protection is part of control. Wolverine muttered, He keeps saying that. Ainz looked at Wolverine. Because it is true. Scott saw the students watching again, peeking from the corner. They were drawn to power. They were afraid of it too. That was the problem with the X-Men's life. Fear always watched. Power always made more fear. Scott turned away from the window and walked toward Xavier's office. He needed to talk to the professor alone, because if this went wrong, it would not just be the mansion that paid. It would be every mutant on Earth. In a hidden room far away, screens played the street footage again and again. A skeleton king, a sentinel cut in half, a frozen moment where the world stopped. A woman in a white coat watched without blinking, an Orcus analyst, calm like math. Is he a mutant? Someone asked. No, the analyst said, but he is a problem. A man in a suit leaned forward. Can we capture him? The analyst tapped a screen and brought up lines of data. Not with standard units. Another person asked, Can we kill him? The analyst's answer did not sound like fear. It sounded like planning. Not safely. Not in public. Not without making him the biggest symbol on the planet. Then she paused. Her eyes flicked to a different screen. A map. A moving dot. The dot marked the X-Men's grounds. "He's with them now," she said. "That means he becomes part of their story." Her mouth tightened. "We take control of the story," she said. "Then we take him." The first time Scott let Ainz leave the mansion, he felt like he had swallowed a rock. They kept it quiet. No press. No crowds on purpose. Just a short trip to a nearby research site the X-Men used sometimes. An old facility they had, turned into a safe lab for field tests. Hank insisted they needed more data on Ainz's magic. Storm insisted they needed to show Ainz they were not holding him like a prisoner. Wolverine insisted on coming because he did not trust any of it. Jean came because Xavier asked her to. Illyana came because she didn't like the way the air had felt since Ainz arrived. Scott came because it was his job to carry the risk. The van rolled through back roads. Trees passed by in a blur. Ainz sat in the middle seat, hands resting on his knees. Perfect posture, like a statue. Scott glanced at him in the mirror. Ainz was watching the world outside the window, like he was counting patterns. He spoke, calm. "Your territory is hidden well." Scott kept his eyes forward. "We've had practice." Ainz's skull turned slightly. "From hunters." Storm's voice stayed calm. "Yes." Ainz nodded once. "Predictable." Wolverine snorted. "Nothing about this is predictable." Ainz looked at Wolverine. "You are wrong." Wolverine leaned forward, eyes hard. "Say that again when someone tries to rip your head off for being different." Ainz did not flinch. "My head is already off the table." Hank let out a short sound that might have been a laugh, then looked guilty about it. Ainz's skull turned toward Hank. "Scholar, you find humor in danger." Hank adjusted his glasses. "Some of us survive that way." Ainz considered it, then said, "Noted." Scott didn't like that either. "Noted." Like this was a report. The facility sat low in the ground, mostly hidden. Concrete, steel doors, quiet. As soon as they stepped inside, Illyana's eyes narrowed. "This place has been watched," she said. Scott's hand went toward his visor. "How do you know?" Illyana pointed. "The air. It's too clean." Like someone scrubbed the trail. Wolverine sniffed, then his jaw tightened. "She's right." Storm's eyes lifted. "Scott." Scott raised a hand. "Positions." They moved like a team, fast and practiced. John reached out with her mind, searching for thoughts nearby. She found nothing. That was worse than finding something. Ainz watched all of this without moving, like he was studying a drill. "You prepare quickly," he said. Scott didn't answer. The first warning came as a low hum. Then the lights blinked once. Then the concrete floor shook. A section of the wall exploded inward. Dust and stone flew across the room. A tall machine stepped through the hole. A sentinel, but not the same kind as the one in the city. This one was sleeker, cleaner. Its eyes glowed a colder red. It moved like it had been built for this exact job. Then a second one dropped from above, through the ceiling, landing with a heavy slam. Then a third. Scott's heart hit his ribs. This was not random. This was a capture team. Storm lifted into the air, wind swirling around her. "Civilians!" Hank shook his head fast. "No civilians here." Wolverine's claws slid out. "Good. Then we can cut loose." Ainz stood still. Then he spoke in a flat, almost bored tone. "So," he said, "the hunters have arrived." The first sentinel raised its arm and fired. Scott's visor flashed red as he turned his head and blasted the beam out of the air with his optic blast. The energy hit the sentinel's chest and pushed it back, but it did not fall. It adapted fast, shifting its stance, locking into the ground. Jean lifted a hand and ripped metal bolts from the ceiling, throwing them like spears. They slammed into joints. The sentinel's shoulder twisted, then snapped back into place like it had practiced healing. Storm dropped a lightning strike onto the second sentinel. It took the hit and kept moving. Wolverine jumped forward, claws carving bright lines in metal. The machine's arm tried to close around him. Wolverine rolled, slipped under it, and sliced again. "Scott!" he barked. "These things are different!" "I see that!" Scott shouted back. Hank's mind raced. "They're learning," he said. "They're watching our patterns." Illyana opened a portal behind the third sentinel and tried to drop it into limbo. The sentinel's feet clamped onto the floor as if gravity had doubled. It did not move. Illyana's eyes widened. "It has an anchor!" Scott felt ice in his stomach. They came prepared for mutants. Now they were here for Ainz. The first sentinel turned its head and locked onto the skeleton king. A net fired out, shimmering with blue energy. It hit Ainz's body. For half a second, Scott's mind shouted, "Got you!" Then the net went still. Not because it held Ainz, because it could not decide what to do. Ainz looked down at it like someone had tossed a rope at a mountain. "Interesting," Ainz said. He lifted one hand. The net did not burn. It did not snap. It simply stopped being a problem. It fell apart in the air like dust. Hank stared. He negated it. Ainz looked at the sentinels again. His voice stayed calm, almost like a teacher. "You build tools for one type of prey," he said. "Then you meet something else." The first sentinel fired again. This time it fired a beam that spread like a wide cone, trying to cover the whole room. Storm's eyes widened. "It's going for all of us." Scott blasted at the center, but the beam kept spreading. John threw up a telekinetic shield. The beam pressed against it. John's teeth clenched. "It's heavy!" Ainz stepped forward. He spoke a word Scott did not understand. The air in front of them hardened into a thick wall. Not bone, not glass. It was like the space itself became a shield. The beam hit it and stopped. No push, no give. Just stopped. Storm's eyes flicked to Ainz, awe and worry at the same time. Wolverine shouted, "Now's your chance, tin cans!" He drove his claws into a knee joint and tore. The sentinel stumbled. Scott blasted again. This time the machine fell back, slamming into a support pillar. Hank fired a device he had brought, a pulse meant to disrupt circuits. The sentinel's head jerked, and for a moment it looked confused. Then it adjusted and kept coming. "It's adapting to me, too," Hank said, shocked. Illyana tried another portal, this time slicing across the sentinel's arm like a door closing. The arm fell. Then the machine's body shifted, and a new arm grew from a hidden compartment, smaller but functional. Illyana's mouth tightened. "Oh, I hate this." Scott looked at Ainz. "Can you stop them without killing everyone in the building?" Ainz turned his skull toward Scott. "Without killing," Ainz repeated. Scott held the look. "Yes." Ainz was silent for a beat. Then he stood straighter. "Very well," he said. A controlled response. He lifted both hands. The room's temperature dropped. Not freezing. Just enough that sweat cooled on skin. The sentinels paused, sensors blinking. Ainz spoke in a steady voice. "Time stop." The world snapped into stillness again. Scott felt it. His breath caught, but he could not move. June could not move. Storm could not move. Only Ainz moved. Scott's eyes could still track, barely, like watching through thick glass. Ainz walked between the machines. He did not rush. He did not panic. He placed a hand on one sentinel's chest, then another, then another. He whispered short words, each one like a stamp on paper. Then he stepped back. Time returned. The three sentinels moved at once. Then all three froze again, but not from time, from something inside them. Their bodies locked hard. Their arms lifted halfway, then stopped like motors had died. Lights flickered. Hank's eyes went wide. He sealed them! Storm lowered slowly to the floor. What did you do? Ainz's voice stayed calm. I removed their ability to act. Wolverine stared. You paralyzed killer robots. Ainz looked at him. A simple solution. Scott's heart beat hard. He wanted to feel relief. But then the ceiling speakers crackled to life. A smooth voice filled the room. Excellent, the voice said. You truly are unique. Jean's face tightened. That's not here, that's remote. Hank stared at his tablet. They're broadcasting into our system, the voice continued. Ainz Ooal gown. The X-Men do not understand you. They fear you. We can offer you clarity. Scott snapped. Shut it off. Hank tried. The system resisted. Ainz tilted his skull up toward the speaker. Who speaks? He asked. The voice laughed softly. A group that keeps humanity safe. Storm's eyes flashed. Orcus, Wolverine snarled. Cowards. They hide behind machines. The voice stayed smooth. We have watched you. We have watched what you did in the city. The public is watching too. Scott's stomach dropped. They're streaming, Jean whispered. Somewhere. Hank's fingers flew. They tapped a satellite link. There's a data beam out of here. The voice went on, almost cheerful. We will offer terms. You come with us. We will make you a solution. A controlled solution. In return, we will lower pressure on mutant communities. Storm's face went cold. They're using us. Scott's mind raced. If Ainz said yes, mutants would be trapped under Orcus forever. If Ainz said no and killed machines on live feed, mutants would be blamed anyway. Ainz sat in the center of it all, calm like a stone. Then he said something Scott did not expect. No, just one word. The voice paused. Pardon. Ainz's red eyes glowed a little brighter. I do not belong to you. The voice turned sharper. Then you are an enemy, Ainz replied. You were my enemy the moment you tried to claim me. The speakers cut out. The paralyzed sentinels suddenly sparked. Hank shouted, They're going to self-destruct! Storm's hands lifted. Wind swirled. Everyone back! John grabbed the air with her mind, trying to hold the machines in place. Scott grabbed Wolverine's shoulder and yanked him toward a doorway. Illyana opened a portal. Move! Move! Ainz did not move back. He stepped forward. He raised one hand. A dome formed around the sentinels. A thick, layered barrier, like a bubble made of hard rules. The first sentinel exploded. The blast hit the inside of the dome and stayed there. The second exploded. The dome held. The third exploded. The dome shook, but did not break. When the light faded, the barrier faded too. Metal scraps clattered to the floor inside the dome, contained like trash in a bin. No fire spread. No ceiling collapse. No one died. Storm stared at Ainz. Her voice came out quiet. You contained it. Ainz looked at her. I said I would provide a controlled response. Scott's chest loosened slightly. Then Hank's tablet pinged again. His face went pale. They got what they wanted, Hank said. Scott's eyes narrowed. What? Hank swallowed. Data. They recorded your time stop, your barrier, your spell structure, all of it. Jean's hands curled into fists. They wanted to learn you. Wolverine spat to the side. And now they'll build something to fight him. Ainz looked down at the scattered metal like it was boring. Then he looked at Scott. You wanted stability, Scott said, voice tight. This is what you brought with you, like it or not. Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. I did not bring them, Ainz said. Your world did. Storm stepped closer to Scott, lowering her voice. Scott, the street footage already spread. This will spread too. Scott knew. He could already see the headlines. The Skeleton King at the X-Men's side. The X-Men sheltering an undead warlord. Orcus would twist it until every human feared every mutant more than before. And they had done it without winning a single fair fight. They had won with a story. Scott looked at Ainz and chose his words carefully. "If you want answers," Scott said, "we will help you. But understand this. Every time you show your power, this world reacts. Hard." Ainz stared at the broken machines. Then he spoke, quiet and flat. "Then we will require strategy." Wolverine barked a short laugh. "Welcome to our life, Bone King." Ainz's skull turned to him. "I have a proposal," Ainz said. Scott's nerves rose again. "What proposal?" Ainz lifted one finger. "First," he said, "you will explain who rules this world." Then a second finger. "Second, you will explain your enemies." Then a third. "Third," Ainz said, "we will establish protocols." Hank blinked. "Protocols?" Ainz's voice stayed calm, like this was obvious. "Yes," he said. "A quest plan." Wolverine groaned. "Oh no." Storm's lips twitched for half a second, like she almost smiled and hated herself for it. Scott did not smile, but deep down, he understood the danger better now. Ainz was not going to run. Ainz was going to organize. And in the X-Men's world, anything that strong trying to organize usually turned into a war. Outside, far away, screens lit up with new clips. A skeleton, a dome, 3 explosions that did not touch the heroes, and a single word that people replayed again and again. No. The world did not hear it as freedom. It heard it as a threat. And somewhere in an Orcus war room, someone smiled. Because now they could point to the screen and say, "See, even the X-Men can't control what they're hiding." The next morning, the world acted like it had woken up angry on purpose. Scott Summers stood in the war room with his arms crossed, staring at 3 screens at once. One showed a news anchor talking fast. Another showed shaky phone footage from the lab attack. The third showed a live shot of a crowd outside a government building. People waved signs. Some signs had the word mutant written like it was a curse. The anchor on the first screen pointed at a freeze frame of Ainz. Bone face, red eyes, calm posture. "Sources say the X-Men are sheltering this unknown entity," the anchor said. "Some are calling him the Lich King of New York. Others claim he is not a mutant at all, but something worse." Scott muted the TV. Behind him, Hank McCoy typed on a tablet with both hands, moving faster than his own thoughts. He had not slept much. Scott could see it in the tightness around Hank's eyes. "They pulled a lot from that feed," Hank said. "Not just visuals. They got energy patterns, spell timing, movement rates." Scott kept his voice level. "Can they copy it?" Hank hesitated. "Not perfectly. Not now. But Orcus doesn't need perfect. They need enough to build countermeasures." Storm walked in, calm and upright, but her face showed strain. "Outside is getting worse," she said. "Parents are calling. Some want to pull their children from the school today." Scott's stomach tightened. "Because of him." Storm nodded. "Because of fear. Fear always looks for the closest target." Scott turned toward the window. The mansion grounds looked peaceful. A few students stood in small groups, whispering. Some looked at the sky like they expected it to tear open again. He heard footsteps. Logan came in without knocking, like he always did. He tossed a folded newspaper onto the table. The front page had Ainz's face on it, drawn in a harsh sketch style. The headline read, "X-Men hide undead warlord." Logan pointed at it. "That's gonna get kids killed." Scott's jaw clenched. "I know." Jean Grey entered behind Logan. Her eyes were tired, but alert. "They're talking about us in places that never talk about us," she said. "Government rooms, military rooms, people who usually pretend we don't exist." Hank's fingers paused. "That is not good attention." Storm took a breath. "Where is Charles?" Scott answered. With him. Jean's face tightened a little. With Ainz. Scott didn't like saying the name out loud anymore. Not because it was hard, because it felt like a word that carried weight behind it. Logan leaned on the wall. So what's the plan, Cyclops? You got a quest plan for this? He said, quest plan, like it was a joke. Scott didn't laugh. He looked back at the screens. We control what we can control. We keep the students safe. We keep him from making a bad choice in public. And we figure out what Orcus wants next. Hank glanced up. They want control. They always do. Logan's eyes narrowed. And if they can't control him? Storm finished the thought, voice low. Then they will try to make him look like a monster. So everyone begs Orcus to save them. Scott turned toward the door. I'm going to Charles. Jean stepped closer. Scott, be careful with how you push. He's not like the people we're used to. Scott looked at her. Neither is Orcus. Joan didn't argue. As Scott left, the anchor on the muted screen kept talking, hands moving, lips forming fear into a story. Scott knew that story could kill them even faster than a sentinel. Charles Xavier did not bring Ainz into the war room. He brought him into the library. It was quiet. It smelled like old paper and clean wood. It felt like a place made to calm people down. Ainz stood near a window, looking out at the grounds. Students crossed the lawn in small groups, staying close to the building. Xavier's chair rolled in softly. He stopped a respectful distance away. You see them? Xavier said. Ainz's skull turned slightly. Yes. They are children, Xavier said, and they are afraid. Ainz's voice was even. Fear is rational. Xavier nodded. Sometimes. But fear also makes people cruel. Ainz looked back out the window. Cruelty is also rational in conflict. Xavier watched him for a moment. He chose his words the way he always did with someone dangerous and hurt at the same time. You stopped the sentinel beam in the city, Xavier said. You contained the explosions yesterday. Those choices mattered. Ainz didn't look proud. He didn't look guilty. He looked like someone logging results. I prevented collateral loss, he said. Xavier moved closer by a small amount. Why? Ainz paused. Wasn't a long pause, but it was real. Order, Ainz said. I require order. Xavier's voice stayed gentle. Order for whom? Ainz's red eyes flickered. For those under my protection. Who are those people? Xavier asked. Ainz did not answer right away. Xavier felt the wall again when he tried to sense deeper. Not a violent wall, a careful one, like a locked door with a guard behind it. Ainz finally spoke. Not here. Xavier accepted that. He did not push. Then let me ask something else, Xavier said. Do you understand how the world will see you? Ainz turned to face him. They see a skeleton king, Xavier said. They don't see your reasons. They see a fear. And fear invites weapons. Ainz replied. Then they will learn. Xavier shook his head slightly. They won't learn by watching. They will learn by choosing a story that makes them feel safe, even if the story is wrong. Ainz was quiet again. Xavier added, You said you wanted stability. In this world, stability is not only about strength, it is also about trust. Ainz's red eyes fixed on Xavier. Trust is inefficient. Xavier's mouth tightened for a moment, then relaxed. It can be, but it can also prevent war. Ainz's fingers moved once, like he wanted to tap a table that wasn't there. War is not always preventable. No, Xavier agreed, but suffering can be reduced. Ainz stared at him. You believe that? I do, Xavier said. Ainz tilted his skull. Despite evidence. Xavier smiled faintly. Despite evidence. Yes. Ainz looked back out the window. His voice dropped, almost like he was speaking to himself. "In my world," Ainz said, "belief often got people killed." Xavier heard that and felt something colder underneath it. Not hatred, loneliness. He didn't name it out loud. He just said, "Then we will try something different here." Ainz's head turned, slow and precise. "What is your proposal?" Xavier answered, "Stay inside for now. No public shows of force unless we have no choice. Let us study what you are, and let us teach you what this world is." Ainz replied, "And in exchange, I will be treated as a guest, not a prisoner." Xavier nodded. "Yes." Ainz stood still, then spoke as if reading a list. "Terms accepted," he said. "However, I require information. Immediate." Xavier waited. Ainz lifted a hand. A floating black page appeared again. Symbols shifting into clean lines. At the top, it formed a bold title in plain English. "Quest Board." Xavier blinked. Ainz pointed to it. "Threat assessment," Ainz said. "Orcus, sentinels, government actors, known mutants, unknown mutants." The page added bullet points as he spoke. Xavier watched, equal parts concerned and amused. Ainz continued. "Resource list, safe zones, allies, enemies." Another section appeared. "And chain of command," Ainz finished, eyes fixed on Xavier. "You will decide who speaks for your faction." Xavier let out a quiet breath. "We already have leadership." Ainz nodded once. "Then formalize it." Xavier's voice stayed calm. "You are used to running a kingdom." Ainz's voice stayed calm back. "Yes." "And you miss it," Xavier said softly. Ainz did not answer, but he did not deny it either. Mr. Sinister did not watch the news like a normal person. He watched it like a chef watching ingredients being delivered. In his private lab, screens showed the same clips over and over. He paused at the moment time froze. He zoomed in on the edge of the effect. He smiled as if he could taste it. "Not mutant," he murmured. "Not cosmic in the usual way. Not sorcery from our little circles." He tilted his head. "But it is. Consistent. Structured. Like a science wearing a cape." A scientist nearby shifted nervously. "Sir, do we approach?" Sinister's eyes glinted. "We always approach. We just do it with manners first." He tapped a button. A small device slid out of a drawer. It looked like a metal flower, folded tight. "Prepare an invitation," he said. "Something polite. Something tempting." The scientist swallowed. "What do we offer?" Sinister's smile widened. "Answers." Then, softer, like a secret, and a way home. Magneto arrived in the afternoon, not with a car, not with a call. He arrived like a statement. The mansion gates bent open on their own. Metal groaned like it was being forced to apologize. Scott felt it before he saw it. The hairs on his arms rose. The building seemed to hold its breath. He stepped onto the front steps and saw Magneto floating a few feet above the ground, cape moving in the wind. Scott's stance stayed firm. "Eric?" Magneto's eyes flicked over Scott. "Scott Summers." Storm came out behind Scott, face calm but eyes sharp. "You can't just break our gates." Magneto's mouth curved slightly. "I did not break them. I moved them." Logan stepped out too, hands in his pockets, claws still inside for now. "Let's skip the poetry," Logan said. "Why are you here?" Magneto looked toward the mansion doors. "Because you are hiding a new weapon." Storm's voice tightened. "He's not a weapon." Magneto's eyes hardened. "Everything is a weapon when fear is holding it." Scott stepped forward. "You want to meet him?" "Yes," Magneto said. "I want to see what kind of king arrives in our world and chooses to stand near Xavier." Scott didn't like the tone, but he couldn't stop him. not without turning this into a fight on the lawn, with students watching. "Fine," Scott said. "But you follow our rules." Magneto's smile was thin. "Rules." He floated down and walked toward the doors like he owned the path. Inside, Ainz waited in the main hall. Still. Upright. Calm. He looked at Magneto and did not move an inch. Magneto stopped several feet away. The air between them felt heavy, like two storms refusing to mix. Storm stood off to the side, ready. Scott stayed centered. Logan leaned near a pillar, eyes narrowed. Ainz spoke first. "You are powerful." Magneto's eyes narrowed. "So are you." Ainz's skull tilted. "You command metal." Magneto lifted his hand slightly. A handful of small screws from a nearby frame floated up, spinning in place. "I do," Magneto said. "And I command my people." Ainz's voice was flat. "You are a ruler." "I'm a protector," Magneto corrected. "And a warning." Ainz's red eyes glowed steady. "A warning to whom?" Magneto stepped closer. "To humans who build cages and call them laws." Ainz watched him as if considering a rival king. "And what is your position toward the faction called X-Men?" Ainz asked. Magneto glanced at Xavier, who had arrived quietly behind them. "Complicated." Xavier's tone was calm. "Eric." Magneto didn't look away from Ainz. "Charles." Ainz's head turned to Xavier for a moment, then back to Magneto. "You oppose him," Ainz said. Magneto's mouth tightened. "I oppose his hope when it becomes blindness." Ainz's voice stayed even. "Hope is often inefficient." Storm's eyes widened slightly. Logan let out a short, rough chuckle. Xavier's expression did not change, but Scott could feel the tension in the room. Magneto looked at Ainz like he was staring through bone into the mind behind it. "Tell me," Magneto said, voice sharp. "Are you a king of people or a king of corpses?" Storm's breath caught. Scott's hand moved toward his visor. Ainz did not flinch. "I am a king," Ainz said simply. Magneto's eyes narrowed further. "That does not answer my question." Ainz lifted his hand. A small black page appeared again in the air. Another quest board. Logan groaned softly. "Oh my God." Ainz pointed to the page. "Your world has factions, conflicting objectives, repeating threats." He looked at Magneto. "You protect your kind through dominance." Then he looked at Xavier. "You protect your kind through diplomacy." He looked back at Magneto again. "Both methods have merit." Magneto's voice was cold. "And which one will you choose?" Ainz's red eyes locked onto his. "Stability," Ainz said. "I will choose stability." Magneto's lip curled. "Stability can be a pretty word for control." Ainz replied. "It often is." Storm stepped forward, voice firm. "Enough." Magneto's gaze snapped to her. "Aurora, you know what happens next. Orcus will not stop. They will build bigger machines. They will take your children." Storm's jaw tightened. "I know." Magneto pointed at Ainz. "And now you have brought a symbol of fear into your home. That fear will spread to every mutant." Scott snapped. He didn't choose to arrive. Magneto's eyes flicked to Scott. "But you chose to keep him." Xavier's voice cut in, calm but firm. "Because abandoning a sentient being, because he scares us, is not who we are." Magneto stared at Xavier for a long moment. Then he looked back at Ainz. "If you truly want stability," Magneto said, "then understand this world. Power is not enough. You must choose who you are willing to protect." Ainz's head tilted a fraction. "I protect those under my banner." Magneto's smile was sharp. "Then choose your banner wisely." He turned, cape sweeping, and walked away as metal around the hall trembled for a moment. At the doors, he paused and looked back once. "I will be watching," Magneto said. Then he left, the gates bending open again like they feared him more than locks. When he was gone, Storm let out a breath she had been holding. Logan muttered, "Well, that was fun." Scott glanced at Ainz. "Don't take his words lightly." Ainz's voice stayed calm. "I do not." But inside his still posture, there was a silent calculation happening. This world's strongest players were not only fighters, they were symbols. 2 nights later, an envelope appeared on the mansion's front table. No alarms triggered. No cameras caught anyone entering. Hank held the envelope like it was a snake. "It's not paper," he said. "It's something else pretending to be paper." Scott's eyes narrowed. "Open it in the lab." They did. With June watching with her mind, with Illyana watching the air itself. Ainz watched without moving, hands folded. Hank slid a blade under the seal and opened it carefully. Inside was a single card. White, clean, too polite. The writing was perfect. To Ainz Ooal, welcome to our charming little world. You seem displaced. I happen to collect rare things and rare people. I can offer knowledge. I can offer pathways. I can offer solutions. Meet me, and I will show you how to stop being lost. Nathaniel Essex. Logan's face tightened. Sinister. Storm's voice was low. He never writes letters unless he wants a trap. Hank read the last line out loud, then swallowed. Jean's eyes stayed on Ainz. "He's tempting you." Scott stared at Ainz. "Don't answer it." Ainz looked at the letter for a long moment. Then he spoke, calm as ever. "This person claims knowledge," Ainz said. Hank's voice sharpened. "He claims a lot of things." Illyana stepped closer. "He will try to cut you open without a knife." Ainz's skull turned toward her. "He will attempt to study me." Illyana nodded once. "Yes." Ainz's voice stayed flat. "That is a threat." Scott watched closely. "So you ignore it?" Ainz raised the letter slightly, like he was weighing it. Then he said, "No." Storm's eyes narrowed. Ainz continued, "I do not ignore threats. I catalog them." He lifted a hand. The letter burned away without flame, turning into gray dust that fell into his palm. Then the dust vanished, like it had never existed. Hank stared. "You destroyed it," Ainz corrected him. "I removed a message. The sender remains." Scott's patience strained. "He wants you to come to him." Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. "Then I will not." June studied Ainz's posture. "But you want what he offered. Answers. A path." Ainz did not deny that. He only said, "I will obtain answers from safer sources first." Scott didn't like that either, because safer meant more controlled by Ainz. Hank exhaled. "We need to assume Orcus and Sinister are both moving." Storm nodded. "And now Magneto is watching too." Logan cracked his neck. "Everybody wants a piece of the Bone King." Ainz's skull turned toward Logan. "Bone King," Ainz repeated. "An assigned title." Logan shrugged. "Welcome to Earth." Ainz looked back to the quiet hall. Then softly, he said something that only Jean caught with her mind. Not words of fear, words of focus. "They are fighting with stories." Jean's eyes widened slightly. Scott didn't hear it, but he felt the shift anyway. Like a door had opened inside the situation. Storm asked, "What are you thinking?" Ainz replied, "I will not allow my identity to be shaped by enemies." Scott's stomach dropped. "That sounds like you're going public." Ainz's voice stayed calm. "No, that would be inefficient." He paused, then added, "But we will prepare." Orcus did not meet in a bright room. They met underground, in clean white halls, in rooms that smelled like new plastic. The analyst who had spoken during the last operation stood in front of a screen now. Behind her, machines hummed. She tapped the screen. A diagram showed Ainz's time-stop event as a curve and a spike. "We cannot outmuscle him," she said. "Not yet." A man with a military haircut frowned. "Then we do not fight him. We direct him." Another person asked, "How?" The analyst didn't smile. Her face was calm like a knife. "We create a situation where his best option looks like the worst option," she said. Screens changed. A map of a neighborhood appeared. A building highlighted. A shelter. A place where mutants without homes sometimes slept. Where runaways got food and blankets. Where families hid when things got ugly. The military man frowned. "That's a civilian site." "Yes," the analyst said. "That is the point." A different person asked, "We will be blamed." The analyst replied, "No. We will be praised, because we will not attack. We will respond." She clicked again. The plan appeared in steps. Step 1. We leak a rumor. We push the public to gather near the shelter, she said. Cameras, phones, fear. Step 2. We create a hostage event, she continued. Not with our people. With a controlled criminal group. They will have weapons that hurt mutants. They will scream anti-mutant slogans. They will look like the public's anger. Step 3. We ensure Ainz Ooal gown arrives, she said, because the X-Men will bring him if the threat is serious. Step 4. We make it impossible for him to win clean, she finished. If he uses lethal force, he becomes proof that mutants shelter monsters. If he refuses, mutants die on camera. Either way, the story belongs to us. Silence filled the room after she finished. Then someone nodded slowly. And if he saves everyone? The analyst's eyes stayed steady. Then we escalate. We make sure the criminals die anyway, and we claim the X-Men did it. We flood the media before the truth can breathe. The military man leaned back. What about Sinister? Magneto? Other wild cards? The analyst answered. We are not controlling the entire world. We are controlling the moment. That is enough. She turned to the screen again. Prepare the stage, she said. And the screens lit up like a theater getting ready for a show. Scott felt it before the call came. It was the way people moved through the day, like something bad was waiting in the corners. Then the call came. A mutant shelter. Threat inside. Armed group. Children present. Storm didn't hesitate. We go. Scott glanced toward Ainz. You stay. Ainz looked at him. The threat level? Scott's jaw tightened. High. Ainz replied. Then your team requires additional force. Scott snapped. Force isn't the only problem. Cameras are. Ainz's head tilted. Cameras are information. They're weapons, Scott said. Ainz considered that, then said, Then we will manage the weapons. Logan scoffed. Buddy, you can't paralyze the whole internet. Ainz didn't respond to Logan. He looked at Scott. I will follow your restriction, Ainz said. No harm to civilians. Controlled response. Storm's voice was firm. Scott, we may need him. If children are involved. Scott swallowed hard. He hated this. He hated that Orchis had forced a math problem with lives. Fine, Scott said. But you do nothing unless I say. Nothing. Ainz nodded. Understood. Jean watched Ainz closely. She could feel his focus like a quiet pressure. Ilyana appeared at the doorway, sword on her back. I'm coming. Scott nodded. You're our exit. Hank lifted a case of gadgets. And I'm bringing signal blockers. Logan cracked his knuckles. Let's go ruin someone's day. Ainz spoke as they moved. Quest accepted. Logan groaned. Stop saying that. Ainz replied. It clarifies purpose. Storm almost smiled again. Almost. Then they left, and the mansion felt colder behind them. The shelter sat on a corner street with old brick buildings and cracked sidewalks. A line of people stood outside. some holding signs, some just watching. Scott's heart sank. Too many phones, too many faces. It was a stage. Storm whispered, "This is wrong." Hank looked at his device. There are signal spikes everywhere. Someone boosted the network here. Jean's eyes narrowed. And there are thoughts, lots of thoughts. Fear, anger. This crowd is ready to explode. Scott took a breath. We keep calm. We keep it fast. We get the kids out. Ainz stepped out of the vehicle, and the crowd reacted like the air had turned sharp. Someone screamed. Someone shouted, "That's him! That's the monster!" Ainz did not move. He stood still and let the fear wash around him like rain. Scott stepped forward, visor glowing faintly. "X-Men, back up! Clear the street!" A few people listened. Many didn't. Logan muttered, "This is a trap. I can smell it." Ileana's fingers twitched like she wanted to open a portal and shove the whole crowd somewhere else. Storm raised her hands, and Wind pushed outward, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to create space. Scott moved toward the shelter entrance with Jean close behind. They heard shouting inside. Then a gunshot. Scott's blood went cold. Storm's wind slammed the shelter doors open. They rushed in. Inside, the air smelled like fear and sweat. Several armed men wore cheap masks. One held a woman by the arm. Another pointed a gun at a corner where kids huddled behind a table. A boy cried, "Don't hurt my sister!" One of the masked men shouted, loud enough for the cameras outside to hear through the open door. "This is what you get for hiding mutants!" Scott's eyes narrowed. Too loud, too perfect. Orcus wanted sound bites. Storm's voice boomed, calm but commanding. "Put the weapons down," the man laughed. "Or what? You'll bring in your skeleton freak." Scott's mind raced. He could blast. He could drop them fast. But bullets and panic could kill kids in 1 second. Joan reached out with her mind, trying to stop fingers from pulling triggers without crushing minds. She found something strange. The men's thoughts were thin, not empty, but trained, like someone had scrubbed them down. They were not random criminals. They were tools. Jean whispered, "They're conditioned." Logan moved like a shadow, slipping behind a shelf, getting a clean angle. Hank slid a small device onto the floor. It blinked. A signal jammer. A weak one, but better than nothing. Scott raised his hand slightly. "No one needs to die today." One of the men shoved the woman. "Say that to the dead mutants your kind caused?" Storm's eyes flashed. "You don't care about them. You're using them." The man's gun aimed at Storm. Jean's mind tightened like a fist around his trigger finger. His finger stopped. He tried to force it. He couldn't. His eyes widened, confused. Scott used that moment. He fired a thin, precise optic blast at the gun barrel. It flew from the man's hand. Logan struck from behind, claws slicing the mask strap, not skin, yanking the man down. Another masked man shouted, "Kill the kids!" He raised his weapon toward the corner. Ainz moved. Scott had not given the word. But Ainz did not attack like a wild animal. He did exactly one thing. He pointed at the gun. The gun turned to dust in the man's hands. No blood, no scream, just a weapon gone. The man stared at his empty hands. Ainz spoke, quiet and heavy. "Weapons are removed." The room went still. The masked men looked at Ainz with pure fear now. The kids looked at him too. One little girl whispered, "Is he a skeleton?" Ainz's red eyes looked down toward the children. He didn't smile. He couldn't. Not with a skull. But his voice lowered, and it was not cruel. "Remain behind cover," he said. "You will not be harmed." Storm watched him closely. Scott did too. Ainz wasn't soothing them like Xavier would. He was giving them a rule. And for scared kids, a rule could feel like a rope to hold on to. Outside, the crowd roared. Phones pressed toward the doorway. Orcus wanted the world to see the skeleton king inside a mutant shelter. Scott stepped between Ainz and the children, voice tight. "You disobeyed me," Ainz replied. "I prevented civilian harm." Scott's jaw tightened. "You moved without command." Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. "Your command was slower than the trigger." Scott hated that Ainz was right. Jean's mind brushed Scott's, warning him not to escalate right now. Storm shouted toward the criminals, "Everyone on the ground!" Most complied. One didn't. One man pulled a small device from his jacket and threw it. A metal ball rolled across the floor and stopped. It beeped. Hank's eyes widened. "That's not a grenade." Ilyana's face went hard. "It's a portal anchor." The ball cracked open. A ring of blue light flashed, and something dropped through. Not a person. A machine head, sleek and white, with a red eye. It unfolded like a spider. A new kind of sentinel unit. Small, fast, and made for indoors. It moved toward the kids like it had one job. Jean flung it back with telekinesis. The machine hit a wall, then snapped upright again, adapting mid-motion. Storm tried lightning, but indoors she held back. She didn't want fire. She didn't want to hurt kids with smoke. Logan lunged, claws out. The machine spun and blasted a pulse that knocked Logan sideways into a table. He landed hard, then rolled up again, growling. "Okay," Logan snapped. "That one's annoying." Scott's mind hit the same wall again. If he cut loose, the shelter could collapse. If he held back, the machine could reach the kids. The crowd outside screamed louder as they saw the machine through the doorway. Orcus had added a second layer. They wanted chaos. Ainz stepped forward. He spoke one word. "Hold!" The air around the machine thickened. Its legs slowed. Its joints creaked like they were moving through glue. It fought it. It pushed forward inch by inch, red eye locked on the children. Hank stared. "It's resisting a magical restraint." Ainz's voice stayed calm. "It is built to resist control." Then Ainz lifted his hand and traced a small shape in the air. A square, a box, a cage. A barrier snapped around the machine, clear, layered, and hard. The machine slammed into it again and again. It could not break it. Ainz turned his skull slightly toward Scott. Containment achieved. Scott swallowed. He didn't like needing this. But he did. "Good," Scott said. "Now we get everyone out." Ilyana opened a portal at the back wall. It showed the quiet forest edge behind the shelter. Storm moved the children first, guiding them with a calm voice. "This way. Stay together." The kids hurried through. Jean held the criminals in place with her mind, but she didn't crush them. She didn't break them. She just pinned them. Hank grabbed the portal anchor ball and crushed it with a tool like a clamp. No more surprises. Logan stood in the doorway to the street, blocking sight lines as much as he could. "Move it!" Ainz stayed inside for one more second, staring at the trapped machine. Then he waved his hand. The machine inside the box went still, not destroyed, just shut down. Scott felt his own fear spike. If Ainz could shut down a sentinel with a wave, Orcus would do anything to get him. Outside, someone shouted, "They're escaping!" Someone else screamed, "Stop them!" The crowd surged. Storm's wind pushed them back, but angry people were heavy. Scott turned his head and blasted a line into the street, not at people, but at the pavement in front of them. The ground cracked, making a clear boundary. "Back!" he shouted. "You will hurt yourselves!" Some stopped. Some didn't. A bottle flew. It shattered near Storm's feet. Logan's eyes went wild for a second. The part of him that wanted to charge, he forced it down. "Not worth it," he growled to himself. Then the worst part happened. A scream from above. Scott looked up. A drone hovered over the street, carrying a camera and a small speaker. The speaker crackled. The same smooth voice from the lab. "Orcus." "Citizens," it said. Loud and clear. "Stand back. You are witnessing the X-Men sheltering an undead warlord. They are escaping justice." Storm's hands clenched. "They're narrating it live." Hank's face tightened. "They're feeding the crowd." Jean's head throbbed as she felt the anger in hundreds of minds rising like heat. Scott snapped to Ainz, who had stepped into the doorway now. "Do not touch the crowd," Scott said, fast. "No spells on them." Ainz looked at the people, then at the drone. Then he made a choice. He didn't cast on the humans. He cast on the drone. The drone froze in midair, like it had hit an invisible wall. Ainz lifted a finger. The drone's speaker crushed inward. The camera lens shattered. The drone fell like a dead insect. The crowd gasped. Some cheered. Some screamed louder. Because now they had a new clip. The Skeleton King dropping a drone from the sky. Scott's stomach sank. Even a good move could be framed as a threat. Storm stepped close to Scott, voice low. "We need to leave. Now." Ilyana's portal still shimmered inside. They moved. Fast. Clean. The last of the team slipped through the portal. And as the portal closed behind them, Scott heard the crowd's roar rise like a wave. He knew what it meant. Orcus had what they wanted. Not a victory. A story. Back at the mansion, the mood was heavy. The children from the shelter had been sent to safe places. Some were now at the school, resting in guest rooms under watch. Storm stood in the kitchen area with a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were far away. Hank paced, reading messages from secure contacts. Logan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Face hard. Scott stood at the table with Ainz across from him. The quest board floated between them again. Updated. Quest. Manage public risk. Quest. Orcus countermeasures. Quest. Find safe base. Scott stared at it. Then at Ainz. "You broke my rule," Scott said. Ainz replied. "I prevented child casualties." Scott didn't deny that. "You still moved without permission." Ainz tilted his skull. "Your permission was a delay." Storm's voice cut in, calm but sharp. "Scott isn't wrong. You're in our world. Your choices affect our people." Ainz's red eyes shifted to Storm. "I understand." Logan snorted. "Do you?" Ainz looked at Logan. "Yes." Logan stepped forward. "Then you understand that Orcus is trying to make you the reason they get to hunt mutants harder." Ainz replied, "Yes." Logan's eyes narrowed. "So what's your move, King?" Ainz's voice stayed flat. "We create a secure anchor." Hank paused. "Anchor?" Ainz nodded. "A fixed point? A base of operations, a controlled environment for spell work and observation. Also," he paused for half a beat, "method to search for my missing domain." John, who had been silent, lifted her gaze. "You're looking for your people." Ainz did not answer her directly, but his stillness was its own answer. Scott's throat tightened. "You can't build a fortress in the middle of New York," Ainz replied. "I am not suggesting New York." Storm asked, "Where?" Ainz looked toward Ilyana, who stood by the doorway, arms folded. "A location near dimensional fault lines," Ainz said. "A place where reality is already stressed. It will reduce the energy cost of my search." Ilyana's eyes narrowed. "You want my help?" Ainz nodded once. "You are the portal specialist." Ilyana's mouth tightened. "And if you tear open something you can't close," Ainz's voice stayed calm. "Then I will close it." Ilyana's eyes stayed hard. "That's not always how it works." Hank stepped closer. "We need to know what this anchor does, exactly." Ainz lifted a hand, and the quest board shifted again. A diagram appeared. Simple shapes, a circle, A point. Lines reaching outward. A stable point, Ainz said. A beacon. It will not open a gate. Not yet. It will search. Scott stared. And if someone else sees the beacon? Ainz looked at him. They may. Storm's voice was low. Then Orcus will come. Ainz nodded. Yes. Logan's mouth twisted. So you're building a lighthouse in Sharkwater? Ainz replied, I am building a lighthouse to find my fleet. Jean's voice was soft. And you're tired of being alone. Ainz's red eyes shifted to her. For a moment, Joan felt a strange thing in him. Not sadness the way humans felt it. More like a cold, heavy fact that never left. Ainz looked away first. I will proceed, he said. Scott's mind raced. Every option was bad. Doing nothing meant Orcus controlled the story. Doing something meant risk. But if Ainz was going to do this with or without them, Scott needed to be there. Fine, Scott said. We do it together, on our terms. Ainz nodded. Quest accepted. Logan groaned again. Stop, please. Storm's lips twitched. No, let him. If he keeps calling it a quest, maybe he won't call it a conquest. No one laughed, but the tension cracked just a little. And then they started planning. They did not choose a normal place. They chose a place that already felt wrong. An old, underground site, abandoned and sealed, hidden under miles of rock. It used to be a black site tied to mutant history. Pain had happened there. Experiments, cages, anger. It left a scar, not just on walls, on the air. Ileana said it was a thin spot. Not quite a door, but a weak seam. Hank hated it. This place is bad for the mind, he said, as they arrived at the sealed entrance. Storm looked at the concrete. That might be why it's useful. No one comes here. Not unless they want trouble. Scott adjusted his visor. We keep this quick. We keep it quiet. Ainz stood at the edge of the dark tunnel and looked down like he was judging a dungeon floor. He lifted his hand. A floating light appeared, pale and steady. Logan squinted. Nice flashlight. Ainz ignored him. They went in. The tunnel walls were damp. Old cables hung like dead vines. The floor was uneven. Some doors were bent, like someone had forced them open long ago. Joan felt it immediately. Thoughts. Not living thoughts. Echoes. Fear trapped in walls. Her head throbbed lightly. Storm noticed. Jean? Jean swallowed. It's loud in a quiet way. Ileana nodded once. That's the scar. Ainz walked in front now, calm and steady. The air did not bother him the way it bothered them. If anything, he looked more comfortable here. Like darkness was a familiar room. Hank whispered to Scott, If I didn't know better, I'd say this place likes him. Scott didn't answer. They reached a wide chamber. Old lab equipment sat broken. A metal table was bolted to the floor in the center. Straps still hung from it. Storm's face hardened. Logan's eyes went distant for a second, like he remembered other tables. Scott felt anger rise in him, then forced it down. Anger made mistakes. Ainz stepped into the center and looked around. This will suffice, he said. Ileana crossed her arms. Explain your steps. Now. Before you start. Ainz nodded. Agreed. He lifted a hand. The quest board appeared again. Quest. Build anchor under it. Numbered steps formed in clear, simple words. Secure perimeter. Set wards. Establish focal point. Signal search. Contain backlash. Hank blinked. You write like you're filing a report, Ainz replied. That is correct. Scott scanned the chamber. Perimeter first. Storm rose slightly into the air and spread her senses outward, feeling airflow in tunnels. Logan moved into the shadows, sniffing, listening. Ileana opened small portals like windows, checking nearby rooms. Jean reached out with her mind to feel for living minds nearby. She felt none, but she felt something else. A pressure, like someone was watching from behind a curtain. She stiffened. Something's here. Logan's claws slid out with a click. Yeah, I feel it too. Hank frowned. I'm not seeing any heat signatures. Storm's voice was low. It might not be physical. Ilyana's eyes narrowed. If it's what I think it is, we need to be careful. Ainz turned his skull toward Jean. Describe. Jean swallowed. It feels like a mind, but spread out. Like fog. Ainz paused. A psychic entity. Jean nodded. Yes. Scott's shoulders tightened. Shadow King. Storm's eyes flashed. Not here. Not now. Ilyana muttered. Thin spots attract thin things. Ainz looked calm, but Jean noticed something subtle. His fingers stopped moving for a beat, as if he had logged a new variable. Then he said, Proceed. With containment. He raised his hands. Golden lines formed in the air and sank into the floor like marks made of light. Wards. The room's air changed. It felt heavier, but safer. Hank whispered, impressed. Those are layered, like multiple locks. Ainz spoke without looking at him. Correct. He placed a small black orb on the old metal table. It looked like a smooth stone, but it pulsed faintly. This is the focal point, Ainz said. Storm stared. What is it? Ainz replied. A component designed to hold a signal without breaking. Scott asked, breaking what? Ainz looked at him. Reality. Hank swallowed. Ilyana's voice was sharp. And you're telling us this now? Ainz replied. You asked for steps. I am providing them. Jean's head throbbed again. The pressure in the room grew. Not from Ainz, from the thing outside the wards, something testing the edges, like fingers on glass. John's eyes narrowed. It's probing. Storm's face went hard. We don't have time. Scott turned to Ainz. Do it. Fast. Ainz nodded once. He placed his hand over the orb. The air in the room went still. Not time stop. Just silence, like the room had decided to listen. Ainz spoke words that sounded like a spell, but he kept them short. Clean. The orb glowed. A thin beam of dark red light rose from it, straight up, and vanished into the ceiling. John flinched. In her mind, she felt it too. Like a signal leaving. Like a shout into the dark. And something answered. Not with words. With hunger. The pressure slammed into the wards. The golden lines on the floor flared. Hank stumbled back. It hit like a wave. Storm planted her feet. Wind formed around her in a tight spiral, not to attack, but to steady the air. Logan bared his teeth. Show yourself. A laugh filled the room, not through ears, through minds. June clutched her head. It's inside our heads. Scott's teeth clenched. June forced herself upright. I can hold it out, but it's strong. A voice slid into June's thoughts like oil. Hello, little flames. June's hands shook. She pushed back, building a mental wall. You are not welcome, June thought. The voice laughed. You built a beacon, and you were surprised someone came. Ilyana's eyes narrowed. Shadow King. Storm's voice was low. Amal Farouk. Jean didn't say his name out loud, but she felt the shape of him, the way he pressed into fear, the way he tried to turn strength into doubt. The wards held, but the voice slipped through cracks in attention. Logan growled, Get out of my head. The voice touched him, and Jean felt it try. It tried to show Logan his worst memories. It tried to make him react. Logan snarled and dug his claws into the floor, grounding himself with pain. Nice try, he spat. I've lived worse than you. Storm's breath hitched as the voice brushed her too, offering visions of her losing control, hurting people with storms. She squeezed her eyes shut and pushed it away. I'm not your weapon, she said out loud, like a promise. Hank's mind raced in panic, seeing lab tables and cages and helpless students. He whispered, "No, no, not them." Scott stepped closer to Hank, voice firm. "Hank, focus. Breathe." Then Scott felt it touch him, a vision of the mansion burning, students running. Scott standing in the center, failing. His knees almost buckled. He forced himself to look at Ainz. Ainz stood over the orb, still as stone. The voice tried to touch Ainz too. John felt it reach toward him like a hand. Then, nothing. Not resistance like a shield, more like reaching for a handle and finding no door. The Shadow King's hand slid off Ainz's mind like it couldn't find where to grip. The laughter paused. "What are you?" Ainz answered out loud, calm and flat. "Undead." Jean felt the Shadow King press harder. Still nothing. Ainz's mind was not empty, but it was. Wrong for this kind of attack. Ordered, cold, guarded, like a fortress with no soft windows. Ainz spoke again to the air. "You are a parasite." The Shadow King's voice hissed in Jean's head. "I am a king." Ainz replied, "You are a thief." John felt something shift. The Shadow King's attention sharpened. He didn't just want the X-Men now. He wanted to understand Ainz. That was dangerous. Ainz lifted his hand away from the orb. The beam stopped, but the signal had already gone out. Ainz turned toward the center of the room and raised one finger. The golden wards on the floor rose upward, forming a cage of light around the entire chamber. A second layer. Containment inside containment. Ilyana's eyes widened. "You're boxing us in with it." Ainz replied, "Yes. It will not escape through your minds if it cannot breach the structure." Joan clenched her teeth. "It's already in the structure. It's feeding on us." Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. "Then we remove its access." He looked at Joan. "Telepath, can you isolate the point of entry?" Joan's head pounded. "It's everywhere." Ainz replied. "Find the strongest thread." Joan forced herself to focus. She reached through the noise, through fear echoes in the walls, through the Shadow King's pressure. She found it. A thin thread leading into the scar of the place, into the old pain, into the memory of cages. "It's tied to the site," Jean gasped. "It's using the scar as a doorway." Ilyana cursed. "Of course!" Storm's eyes flashed. "Then we leave. Now." "We don't fight it here!" Scott nodded. "Ilyana, portal us out." Ilyana raised her hand, and the Shadow King pushed. A surge hit her mind, trying to twist her focus, trying to make her open a portal the wrong way. Ilyana's hand shook. "No," she hissed, fighting her own power. "Not today." Logan stepped toward her, grounding her with a hand on her shoulder. "You got this." Ilyana's jaw tightened. She forced her fingers steady. A portal sparked, then flickered, then died. Hank shouted, "It's disrupting the portal," Jean forced out. "It wants us trapped here, with him." Scott's blood turned cold. The Shadow King didn't just want fear, he wanted Ainz. Ainz watched them struggle, then spoke a word. The air around Ilyana cleared like something had been scraped away. Not a gentle spell, a clean removal of interference. Ilyana's eyes widened. "What did you—" "Focus," Ainz said. Ilyana didn't argue. She opened the portal again. It held. Storm moved first, grabbing Hank by the arm. "Go." Hank stumbled through. Logan pushed Scott lightly. "Move, boss." Scott went, then turned back. "Ainz!" Ainz did not move toward the portal. He stepped toward the orb. John shouted, "If you stay, it will keep pushing through us." Ainz replied, calm as ever. "Then, I will end the push." He raised both hands. Jean felt his spell form like a grid snapping into place. Ainz spoke in a voice that felt like stone. Banishment. The golden cage brightened. The Shadow King screamed in John's mind, sharp and furious. You cannot send me away. This is my world. Ainz's voice did not change. This is my structure. The pressure slammed again, trying to break the wards. Ainz did not budge. Jeanne felt the Shadow King's grip on her mind loosen, not because Jeanne was stronger, but because the door was being forced shut. The scar-site doorway tightened, then snapped closed. The laughter cut off like a cord being sliced. Jeanne gasped and almost fell forward into the portal. Scott caught her arm. Jeanne! I'm okay, Jeanne panted. Go. Scott hesitated one more second, looking at Ainz. Ainz turned his skull toward him. Leave, Ainz said. Quest objective. Survival. Scott hated that those words sounded like care without warmth. He stepped through the portal with Jeanne. Ilyana closed it fast. The underground chamber vanished. Silence hit the forest air like relief. Storm held John's shoulders. Breathe. John nodded, eyes wide. He pushed hard. Hank rubbed his temples. That was the Shadow King. He doesn't give up once he smells a weakness. Logan looked at Ilyana. Can you open it again? Ilyana shook her head fast. Not right now. If we reopen, we risk letting it follow. Scott's chest tightened. Ainz is still in there. Jean's eyes closed. She reached out, careful. I can't feel him, she whispered. Scott's heart sank. Then, in the air, a thin line of dark red light flickered once, like a distant signal. And then it stopped. Hank stared. That was from the anchor. Storm's voice was low. So it worked. Scott's jaw clenched, or it called something. They waited. Seconds felt like minutes. Then Ilyana opened a small window portal, not a full door, just a view into the chamber. Inside, the room was intact. The orb sat on the table, dim now. The wards had faded into quiet lines, and Ainz stood alone, untouched. He turned his skull toward the portal window like he had been waiting. Operation complete, Ainz said. Storm's eyes narrowed. Are you hurt? Ainz replied. No. John swallowed. The Shadow King, Ainz interrupted, calm, contained and expelled. Logan muttered, show off. Ainz's red eyes shifted slightly. Correct. Logan blinked. Did you just agree with me? Ainz replied, accuracy is valuable. For a moment, even Scott almost smiled. Then Scott remembered the signal. What did the anchor find? Scott asked. Ainz was silent for a beat. Then he said, it found a response. Hank's breath caught. From your world? Ainz's voice stayed flat. Unknown. Jean's eyes narrowed. So something answered your beacon. Ainz nodded once. And that, Jean thought, is going to attract more than the Shadow King. They did not go back to the mansion right away. They moved to a secondary safe site, a small X-base in the woods with secure rooms and thick walls. Scott wanted privacy. He wanted fewer ears. He wanted time to think. Ainz stood in the center of the room, calm, while Hank ran scans on the orb through layers of shielding. Storm watched Ainz like she watched clouds before a storm, not because she feared him alone, but because she feared what his choices would pull into their world. Ilyana sat on a crate, arms crossed, trying to ignore the cold sweat on her skin. Psychic pressure always left a mark. Logan paced like a caged animal. Jean sat with her hands folded, eyes closed, steadying herself. Scott broke the silence. You baited a psychic king. Ainz's skull turned. I executed a search. Scott's voice sharpened. In a scar site full of pain. That was a bad call. Ainz replied. It was an efficient call. It reduced cost. Storm's voice cut in, calm but firm. Efficiency is not the only value here. Ainz looked at her. Then define your values. Storm held his gaze. People, dignity, choice. Ainz's red eyes flickered, not with emotion but with attention. Noted? Hank spoke, trying to keep the talk practical. The anchor signal lasted less than 10 seconds, but it left traces. Someone with the right sensors could detect it. Scott's stomach tightened. Orcus, Ilyana added. Sinister, John whispered. And anything else that watches seems. Logan's eyes narrowed. So we lit a flare. Ainz replied. Yes. Scott's voice rose slightly. And you still did it, Ainz answered, calm and honest. Yes. Scott stared at him, then forced his voice down again. Why? Scott asked. Ainz paused. And in that pause, Scott saw something important. Ainz could talk like a king all day, but he had a reason deeper than control. Ainz finally spoke. Because I will not remain blind, he said. Because I will not remain alone. Jean opened her eyes slowly. Storm's expression softened for a second, then hardened again. I understand loneliness. But your loneliness can get others killed. Ainz looked at her. Then we will create a system that reduces that risk, Logan snorted. Here we go. Another system. Ainz raised his hand. The quest board appeared again, fresh and bright. New quest. Establish neutral territory under it. More lines formed. Goal. Safe base not tied to mutant children. Goal. Controlled testing zone. Goal. Reduce Orcus story control. Scott stared. Neutral territory. Ainz nodded. A separate domain. Not your school. Not your shelter. A place where I can operate without placing your children at direct risk. Storm's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting you leave the mansion? Ainz replied. Yes. Scott's mind raced. That could be good. It could also be worse. You would be alone, Scott said. Ainz replied. I'm already alone. June watched him. Feeling the cold fact behind his words, Hank spoke carefully. If you build a base, Orcus will try to find it. Ainz replied. Then they will come to a place designed for conflict. Logan grunted. So you want to move the battlefield away from kids? Storm's voice softened a fraction. That is not a bad instinct. Scott still didn't trust it fully. And what do you gain besides safety? Ainz's red eyes glowed steady. A stable point to continue the search. Scott's jaw tightened. For your people. Ainz did not deny it. Ilyana's voice was sharp. If you keep sending signals, you keep ringing bells. Shadow King was just the first thing to answer. Ainz replied, I will limit signals. John asked, Can you? Ainz's voice stayed flat. Yes, I can choose. Scott watched him closely. That was the real fear. Ainz could choose. And the world would have to live with it. Hank's device beeped again. He looked down and his face went pale. What? Scott asked. Hank swallowed. We're picking up an external scan, far away but real. Someone is looking for the same energy signature. Storm's eyes narrowed. Orcus. Hank nodded slowly. Most likely. Logan growled. Told you. Sharks? Ainz did not react with panic. He reacted with planning. Then, Ainz said, we proceed to Phase 2. Scott's eyes narrowed. Phase 2? Ainz lifted the quest board. A new line appeared. Quest. Misdirect the hunters. Storm's voice was low. What are you planning? Ainz looked at them one by one. Orcus believes I am a weapon they can frame, Ainz said. Sinister believes I am a mystery he can harvest. The Psychic King believes I am a doorway he cannot open. He paused. I will not allow them to choose the battlefield, Ainz said. I will choose it. Scott felt the weight of that. Not because Ainz was boasting, because Ainz was stating how he lived. Storm stepped closer, voice firm. If you choose the battlefield, You also choose the cost. We will not let you choose it alone." Ainz's skull turned toward her. For a moment, the room felt like it did in the library. 2 leaders. 2 methods. Ainz finally nodded once. "Agreed," he said. "Alliance parameters accepted." Logan muttered, "He talks like a robot." Ainz replied, without missing a beat, "Your observation is noted." Logan threw up his hands. "Stop noting me!" Jean's lips twitched. Even Scott's face softened for half a second. Then the moment ended, because the reality didn't care about jokes. Hank looked up from his devices, voice tight. "They're scanning again." Storm's eyes narrowed. "Then we move fast." Scott squared his shoulders. "We go back. We protect the school. And we prepare for the next hit." Ainz's red eyes glowed steady. "Yes," he said. "The next move will be targeted." John felt the truth in that like a cold drop in her stomach. Because Orcus had tried to trap Ainz with a shelter. Now they had seen what he could do with restraint. So next time, they would not aim for a fight. They would aim for a choice. And choices were where people broke. Days became weeks. The mansion stayed the same on the outside. Old stone, green grass, quiet trees. But inside, everything felt tighter. Scott Summers started every morning with the same list in his head. Check the perimeter. Check the students. Check the news. Check the scanners. Then check the guest. Ainz Ooal did not sleep. That alone made Scott uneasy. Not because Scott needed everyone to be human, but because it meant Ainz had more hours than everyone else to think. And Ainz thought like a ruler. Scott walked into the briefing room and saw it again. A floating black page hung in the air over the table. Quest board under it were neat lines. New tasks, updates, notes. It looked like a school assignment sheet. It felt like a war plan. Hank stood beside it with a coffee he wasn't drinking. He rubbed his forehead and sighed. "He updates it every night," Hank said. "Like clockwork." Storm entered behind Scott, calm and steady. She glanced at the board and spoke with careful patience. "Good morning, Ainz." Ainz stood at the far end of the room, still and straight. Red eyes steady. "Good morning," Ainz replied. "Report is ready." Logan was already there, sitting on a chair backwards like he was trying to disrespect it on purpose. He pointed at the board. "You know," Logan said, "normal people use sticky notes." Ainz turned his skull toward him. "This is superior to sticky notes." Logan threw his hands up. "Of course it is." John sat near the window, eyes half closed, as if she was listening to a sound nobody else could hear. Ilyana leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Ainz like she watched a demon with good manners. Scott stepped closer to the table. "Start with Orcus." Ainz lifted one finger. The board shifted. A simple map appeared. Dots, lines, circles. "Orcus has increased Sentinel patrol frequency near known mutant communities," Ainz said. "They are also running story operations, protest clusters, online amplification, paid speakers." Storm's eyes narrowed. "They're stirring crowds." Ainz nodded once. "Yes, they are turning social pressure into operational cover." Hank tapped his tablet. "We've seen the same, and they've changed their scan pattern. They're hunting for your anchor signature." Ainz did not react with surprise. "Expected?" Scott's jaw tightened. "Any sign they found the underground site?" Ainz replied, "No confirmed breach. But they are close." Ilyana's voice was sharp. "Close enough to force us to move." Ainz looked at her. "Yes." Jean finally opened her eyes. "And sinister?" The room went a little colder in Scott's mind. Not because Sinister was stronger than Orcus, but because Sinister was harder to predict. Ainz lifted a second finger. The board changed again. Sinister sent another message, Ainz said. Logan sat up. How? We burned his letter, Ainz replied. He used a person this time. Hank's eyes widened. A courier? Ainz nodded. A human. Unaware. He delivered a sealed package to a drop point near the property line. Storm's voice tightened. We missed that. Ainz's tone stayed flat. My wards detected it. Scott forced his voice steady. What did it say? Ainz's hand opened. A small white card appeared in the air, held by magic. The writing was clean and elegant, like it was proud of itself. You are building a home. How sweet. I can help you find the one you lost. Meet me where stories can't reach. Essex, Logan's lip curled. He thinks he's funny. Hank's face went pale. He thinks he can buy you. Ainz stared at the card for a long moment. Then he made it vanish, like it was dust again. Scott watched him closely. You're not meeting him, Ainz replied. I am not meeting him on his terms. Storm stepped closer. That still sounds like meeting him. Ainz turned his skull toward her. This is a countermeasure. John's voice was quiet. You want to set a trap. Ainz did not deny it. Yes. Ilyana's eyes narrowed. Sinister doesn't walk into traps. He sends traps. Ainz nodded once. Correct, which is why the target is not his body. Hank frowned. Then what is it? Ainz's red eyes glowed slightly brighter. His curiosity? Scott felt the edge of it. Ainz didn't just want to survive. He wanted to control the board. And Magneto? Storm asked. Ainz's gaze stayed steady. Magneto observes. He has not acted yet. Logan muttered. Yet. Scott stared at the empty space where the card had been. You said you wanted a neutral territory base. Ainz replied. Yes. Hank leaned forward. A place not tied to our students. Ainz nodded. Correct. Scott took a breath. This was the part he could almost agree with. Almost. Where? Scott asked. Ainz lifted his hand. The map returned, zooming outward. A point lit up far from the mansion, an abandoned industrial zone near the edge of a city. Old warehouses, broken roads, few people, easy to hide. Storm studied it. No civilians living nearby, Hank added, but close enough for Orcus to reach. Ilyana's voice was flat, and close enough for demons if the air is thin. Ainz replied, I will thicken it. Logan rolled his eyes. He says that like he's fixing a roof. Scott pressed. You build it. Orcus calls it a threat. You don't build it. Orcus uses us as bait again. Either way, they win the headline. Jean spoke softly. Unless we change the headline. Scott looked at her. How? John's eyes moved to Ainz. By making it clear he isn't Orcus's weapon, and he isn't ours either. By making him his own factor. Storm's voice held a warning. That could also scare people more. Jean nodded. Yes, but it might stop Orcus from claiming they're the only ones who can handle him. Logan snorted. Great. A PR war with a skeleton king? Ainz's skull turned toward Logan. Public perception is an operational domain. Logan stared. Did you just call public opinion a battlefield? Ainz replied, yes. Scott rubbed his face. Okay, here's what we do. We build the neutral base. We keep it hidden. And we do not go public unless Orcus forces it. Ainz nodded once. Agreed. Storm's eyes stayed on Ainz. And you follow command structure during missions. Ainz replied. Define structure. Scott pointed at himself. When we're on a rescue, I call the shots. Ainz paused, then nodded. Understood, Logan muttered. That sounded like he's signing a contract. Hank sighed. Because he is. Ainz lifted his hand again. The quest board changed. Quest. Build neutral territory. Objective. Relocate risk away from children. Objective. Establish controlled zone. Objective: reduce enemy story control. Storm looked at the first objective, and her expression softened just a little. "Fine," she said. "We do it." Ainz built like he breathed. He did not lift steel beams by hand. He did not weld. He did not hammer nails. He walked through the warehouse at night while wind moved through broken windows. Storm watched from a catwalk above, her hair lifting in the cold draft. She kept her senses wide, listening for helicopters, trucks, boots. Ainz stood in the middle of the empty floor and traced patterns in the air. Lines of gold and black sank into concrete, like ink seeping into stone. Wards, barriers, rules. Hank stood behind a portable shield wall of his own devices, scanning every pulse. "This is insane," Hank whispered, mostly to himself. "He's writing a system into the building." Ilyana sat nearby, sword across her lap, feeling the air. "It's not limbo magic," she said. "It's structured, like code." Logan paced, sniffing, listening, bored in the way only Logan could be bored when something world-ending was happening. Scott watched Ainz's movements and tried not to let it show how much it got under his skin. Every step Ainz took said, "I have done this before. I have built worlds that obey me." Storm landed softly near Scott. "He's careful," she said. Scott didn't look away. "He's controlling." Storm didn't deny it. "Yes, but he's also trying to move danger away from children." Scott's mouth tightened, for his own reasons. Storm's voice stayed calm. Motives can be mixed. That doesn't always make the action wrong. Scott stayed silent. Across the floor, Ainz finished a final line. The air in the warehouse changed. It felt quieter. Not empty. Just protected. Ainz turned his skull toward them. "Phase 1 complete." Logan groaned. "Please don't say phase." Ainz replied. "Phase 2 begins." Logan looked at Scott. "Kill me." Scott ignored him. "What's phase 2? Ainz raised one hand. A simple doorframe of light appeared in the air. Not a portal like Ilyana's. Something else. A boundary marker. "This is the outer gate," Ainz said. "Anyone crossing will be detected." Hank's eyes widened. "You made a perimeter alarm." Ainz nodded. "Yes." Storm asked. "Can it harm someone?" Ainz replied. "Only if I instruct it to." Storm held his gaze. "You won't." Ainz paused. "Not without cause." Scott's eyes narrowed. "We are not doing cause." Ainz adjusted. "Not without necessity." Scott still didn't love it, but he took the win. "Good." Jean arrived late, stepping out of Ilyana's portal with a small exhale, like she had been holding her breath all day. She looked around, then at Ainz. "This place feels quieter." "That helps." Ainz's skull tilted. "Your mind is sensitive." John didn't argue. "Yes." Ainz looked at the empty floor again. "This will be the neutral territory." Logan muttered. "You mean your new castle?" Ainz replied. "A base." Logan snorted. "Sure." Scott didn't have time to argue about names. His phone buzzed. Hank's tablet buzzed at the same time. Storm's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Hank looked down first. His face tightened. "Orcus activity spike." Scott's message was shorter. "Emergency. City grid. Orcus announcement." Scott's stomach dropped. "They're making a move." Jean's eyes widened. "I feel something. Fear. A lot of it." Ilyana stood, sword in hand. "Where?" Hank's fingers flew. A map popped up, a circle highlighted. A big power facility near the city. Not a nuclear plant, but a major energy hub. If it failed, half the city would go dark. Hospitals, traffic, everything. Storm's voice went low. "They'll blame mutants." Scott's jaw clenched. "And they'll blame him." Ainz turned his skull toward the map. An engineered crisis, Ainz said. Logan growled. Orcus loves those. Hank's eyes flicked to a second window. They're broadcasting. Public statement. A video feed opened. The same clean analyst from before stood in front of a logo, calm and confident. Citizens, she said, voice steady. Orcus has identified a high-risk threat near critical infrastructure. We advise everyone to evacuate the area. Do not approach. Orcus response units are en route. Scott's hands clenched. They're setting the story before the fight. Storm's eyes narrowed. They're already calling it a threat, Jean whispered, and people will fill in the blank. Scott looked at Ainz. This is what I meant. Every time you show up, they use you. Ainz's voice stayed calm. Then we will deny them the outcome they desire. Ileana opened a portal. We go now. Scott hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Team move. He looked at Ainz. You follow my call. Ainz nodded once. Understood. Logan muttered. Here we go. The energy hub looked like a metal city within a city. Tall towers, thick cables, huge transformers, warning signs everywhere. People were already running. Sirens screamed. A crowd gathered at a distance, phones out, filming. Orcus drones hovered overhead like insects. Scott stepped out of the portal first, visor glowing. Storm floated above him, wind ready. June stayed near the center. Hank moved fast to a control panel. Logan prowled the edges. Ainz stepped out last. The crowd saw him, and the noise changed. It wasn't just fear. It was anger. Someone shouted, "That's the skeleton!" Someone else yelled, "X-Men brought him!" Scott raised his voice, sharp and clear. "Back up! Move away from the fences!" Storm's wind pushed outward, creating space. Then the ground shook. A section of the facility gate blew inward, not from outside, but from within. Something stepped out. Not a normal sentinel. This one was taller, sleeker, and built with strange panels that looked like they could shift. It moved like it had been trained on Ainz's last fight. Its eye glowed a hard red, and on its chest was a symbol Scott hated. Orcus. Hank's breath caught. They built a counter unit. Jean's voice was tight. It's thinking. Logan growled. It's hunting. The machine raised one arm, not at the X-Men, at a transformer tower behind them. Scott's eyes widened. It's going to take the grid down. Storm shot upward. I can hold the lightning off. A second machine stepped out. Then a third. They spread out. One went for the grid. One went for the crowd line. One moved straight toward Ainz. Ainz watched them like pieces on a board. Scott shouted, "Storm! Grid! Logan! Crowd line! Hank! Shut down the fail-safes! John! Cover mines! Keep the crowd calm!" Jean's eyes flared. "I'll try!" Scott turned to Ainz. "You contain the one targeting you. Do not use lethal force unless I say." Ainz nodded once. Acknowledged. The grid unit fired a pulse at the transformer. Storm slammed into the air above it, wind and lightning under control, deflecting the strike upward into the sky. She held the charge away from the tower with raw force and careful control. Her face tightened with effort. Logan sprinted toward the crowd line. A machine aimed a shock net at the people, trying to cause panic and stampede. Logan leapt, claws slicing the net emitter mid-air. Sparks flew. He landed and roared, "Move back!" like a warning animal. The crowd stumbled backward, more afraid of Logan's rage than the machine for a moment. Hank slid into a control station and started typing. "Who gave Orcus access to this system?" he muttered, furious. Jean spread her mind out like a wide blanket, trying to dampen panic. She didn't erase fear. She just tried to keep it from turning into a riot. And Ainz faced the hunter unit. The unit fired first. A focused beam, thin and fast, aimed at Ainz's head. Ainz did not flinch. A barrier snapped up at the last instant, the beam hitting it and stopping dead. The unit shifted and fired again, changing frequency mid-shot. It was learning. Ainz lifted one hand. The air around the unit hardened like invisible walls closing in. The unit's limbs slowed. It pushed through, inch by inch, using raw power. It was strong. It was built for this. The crowd gasped as they watched the Skeleton King and the machine struggle without even touching each other. Scott saw the cameras and felt sick. This was exactly what Orcus wanted. Then the analyst's voice came from a hovering drone speaker, loud and calm. "Citizens," she said, "you are witnessing the true threat. The X-Men have brought an undead warlord to a critical facility. If the grid falls, remember who was present." Storm's jaw clenched. "She's doing it again." Hank shouted, "They wired the comms! I'm locked out!" Jean's head pounded. "The crowd is turning!" Scott's mind raced. If the grid failed, people would die in hospitals. If the crowd surged, people would die in stampedes. If Ainz broke control and killed machines too brutally on camera, Orcus would win the story. The grid unit fired again, trying to overload the tower. Storm caught it and threw it into the sky like a spear of light. Her face was tight with strain. "I can't do this forever." Logan's voice came through the comms, rough. "People are pushing! They're scared!" Scott looked at Ainz. "Ainz," he shouted, "can you protect the grid and the crowd without hurting them?" Ainz's red eyes did not change. "Yes," he said. Scott's stomach dropped. "Then do it!" Ainz raised both hands. The air went quiet in a way that made Scott's skin prickle. Not time stop. Something else. Like the world was about to be told a rule it could not refuse. Ainz spoke, calm and heavy. "Mass hold." A wave spread out from him. It did not grab people. It did not touch the crowd. It wrapped around machines. All three Orcus units froze mid-motion. Storm's lightning hovered in the air for a split second, then discharged harmlessly into the sky as the grid unit stopped firing. Logan blinked as the crowdline unit froze with its arm half raised. Hank stared at his screen. He stopped them all. Jean felt it too, like a pressure that had a clear target and ignored everything else. The crowd saw the machines freeze. Some cheered. Some screamed harder because they didn't understand what they had just witnessed. The drone speaker crackled again, voice sharper now. "You see," the analyst said, "he can paralyze our technology at will. No system is safe. No city is safe." Scott's teeth clenched. "Shut up!" Ainz turned his skull toward the drone. He did not destroy it. He did not smash it out of the sky. He did something worse for Orcus. He made it irrelevant. Ainz lifted one finger and traced a circle in the air. A clear dome formed over the entire facility yard. Not over the crowd outside the fences, only over the danger zone. Inside the dome, sound muffled. Light softened. The drone's broadcast became a dull hum. Hank's eyes widened. "He cut the signal inside the dome," Jean whispered. "He cut the story." Scott's chest loosened slightly, but Orcus had planned for more than one layer. The ground shook again. A loud crack sounded from inside the facility. Hank's eyes widened. "They planted charges!" Storm shouted. "Scott! The transformer core!" A section of the tower began to spark. A cascade of light raced down cables like fire on a rope. If it reached the core, the tower would blow. Storm could not catch that in time without risking a city-wide lightning chain. Scott turned to Ainz, voice sharp. "Contain the core! Now!" Ainz moved. For the first time in a while, he did not look like a king who had time. He looked like a ruler deciding the cost of a second. He spoke a short spell. A thick, layered barrier formed around the transformer core like a clear box. The sparks hit the barrier and stopped. Then Ainz spoke again. The energy inside the box went quiet, like it had been put to sleep. Hank's mouth fell open. He insulated it from the grid. He isolated the whole system. Storm dropped to the ground, breathing hard. Thank you. Ainz didn't respond to thanks. He only looked at the frozen Orcus units. Scott's voice was tight. Now we take them down. Non-lethal. No public executions. Logan cracked his neck. Finally. Hank pulled out a device and jammed it into the nearest unit's leg joint. Disruptors. Meet paralyzed target. Storm wrapped wind around another unit and tipped it onto its side, pinning it. John used telekinesis to rip out key components and place them in a neat pile like she was cleaning a room. Scott walked toward the unit that had targeted Ainz. It was still frozen. Scott glanced at Ainz. Can you keep it held? Ainz nodded. Yes. Scott aimed a precise optic blast at the unit's chest panel, cracking it open without making it explode. Inside, wires and a small core pulsed. Hank leaned in and hissed, "That core is new. They're using a different power source." Ileana stepped closer, eyes narrowing. It feels wrong. Jean's head throbbed again. There's something in it, not just tech. Scott's stomach tightened. Sinister. Hank's eyes widened. You think he helped Orcus? Jean's voice was tight. I think someone is mixing things that should not mix. Ainz looked at the exposed core. Then he said, calm as ever. This is bait. Scott nodded slowly. To push you into doing something monster-like on camera. Ainz turned his skull toward Scott. They failed. Scott's jaw tightened. This time. The dome faded as the immediate danger ended. Sound rushed back in. The crowd outside roared again, but now the scene looked different. No burning towers, no dead civilians, no X-Men fleeing. Just 3 Orcus machines lying disabled, and the X-Men standing between the crowd and the facility like a wall. The drone voice tried one last time. Citizens, you have seen the risk. Storm lifted her hand. Wind rose, not as an attack, but as a curtain. It pushed the drone away from the yard, sending it spinning into an empty parking lot where it clattered and died. No dramatic explosion, just a loud, ugly crash. Logan pointed at the broken drone and shouted to the crowd, They tried to blow your power and blame us! Open your eyes! Some people shouted back. Some cursed. Some looked uncertain. Jean felt it shift. Not trust, not love, but doubt. And doubt was the first crack in Orcus's story. Scott turned to Ainz, voice low. You did good. Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. I followed the objective. Scott almost smiled. Almost. Then Hank's tablet buzzed again. His face went pale. We have a problem. Storm's voice tightened. What now? Hank swallowed. Orcus just issued a public offer. They want to register Ainz as a controlled asset. They're framing it as a safety measure. Scott's chest tightened. Of course. Jean's eyes narrowed. They want him on a leash. Logan growled. Try it. Ainz's skull turned slightly, like he was listening to something else. Not the tablet. Not the crowd. The world. Their offer is not a negotiation, Ainz said. It is ownership. Storm's voice was calm but hard. And what will you do? Ainz's answer was simple. No. Just like before. But this time, Scott understood the difference. The first no had sounded like a threat to the world. This no sounded like a line drawn for the world. Ainz looked at Scott. I will not be contained by Orcus. Scott nodded. Good. Ainz continued. And I will not endanger your children by remaining inside your school. Storm's eyes widened slightly. Scott's stomach tightened. You're moving out. Ainz nodded once. Yes, Neutral territory will be activated. Logan stared. You're just leaving? Ainz replied. I am relocating. John watched him closely. You're doing this because you don't want to be used as a weapon against mutants. Ainz paused, then said, Yes. It was the closest thing to a moral statement Scott had heard from him. Storm stepped closer. We will still work together. Ainz looked at her. Alliance remains. Scott took a breath. Then we set rules for contact, for emergencies, for what you do in public. Ainz lifted his hand. The quest board appeared again, clean and bright. New protocols. Emergency call. X-Men may request support. Public engagement, minimal. Only if civilians face mass harm. No undead creation, within mutant zones and civilian zones. Neutral territory. Primary operations base for Ainz. Information sharing. Threat intel exchanged both ways. Logan squinted at the board. You made a treaty. Ainz replied. Correct. Hank exhaled. This is insane. Storm's voice softened, just a fraction. It might also be the only way to survive what's coming. Scott stared at the words. He didn't trust Ainz, but he trusted Orcus even less. And right now, Ainz had chosen a path that pulled danger away from kids. Scott looked up. We do this. But if you break the rules, Ainz finished calmly, you will respond. Scott nodded. Yes. Ainz's red eyes stayed steady. Acceptable. 2 nights later, Magneto arrived again. Not at the mansion, at the warehouse. Scott felt the metal shift before Magneto even appeared. Bolts hummed. Loose scraps lifted off the floor like they were being called. Storm stood beside Scott. Wind ready. Logan cracked his neck. Great. Drama King is here. Jean stood near the back, mind open but guarded. Illyana leaned against a pillar, sword in hand, because she didn't trust meetings. Ainz stood in the center of his new domain, still as a statue. Magneto floated down through a broken skylight like he owned gravity. He took in the wards, the quiet air, the sense of structure. Then he looked at Ainz. You built a fortress, Magneto said. Ainz replied, a base. Magneto's mouth tightened. Words. He turned his gaze to Scott. You let him leave your school, Magneto said. Scott kept his voice steady. Yes. Magneto's eyes narrowed. Because you fear him near your children. Scott didn't deny it. Because Orcus was using him to hurt our kids. This moves the risk. Magneto studied the place again. Smart. Then he faced Ainz. You refuse Orcus, Magneto said. Good. Ainz replied. I refuse ownership. Magneto stepped closer. Then choose your side. Storm's voice cut in, calm but sharp. Eric. Magneto didn't look at her. Aurora, this world is a cage. If he stays neutral, he will still be used. If not by Orcus, then by Xavier's hope. Ainz's red eyes glowed steady. I do not require your permission to choose. Magneto smiled, sharp and pleased. Good. Then choose. Ainz was silent for a moment. Then he said, I choose stability with minimal casualties. Magneto's eyes narrowed. That is not a side, Ainz replied. It is a strategy. Magneto's voice turned colder. Strategy does not protect people. Commitment protects people. Jean spoke softly. Sometimes, strategy is the only thing that keeps people alive long enough to have commitment. Magneto's gaze flicked to her, then back to Ainz. Here is my offer, Magneto said. Stand with mutant kind openly. Become a symbol that Orcus cannot touch. Scott's stomach tightened. That would be war. Storm's face hardened. You want him to be a banner. Magneto's eyes flashed. Yes, because banners win battles of fear. Ainz looked at Magneto. Then he answered, calm and clear. I will not be your banner. Magneto's smile faded slightly. Then you are wasted. Ainz replied, no, I am positioned. Magneto stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed once, quiet and sharp. You are not a hero, Magneto said. Ainz replied. Correct. Magneto's eyes narrowed. And you are not a simple monster either. Ainz did not answer that. Magneto turned toward the skylight. Very well. Keep your neutral castle. He paused and looked back once, eyes hard. But understand this, Magneto said. If Orcus forces a choice, you will make one. Everyone does. Then he rose and vanished into the night, metal settling as if it could breathe again. Storm let out a slow breath. Logan muttered, That went better than I expected. Illyana rolled her eyes. Low bar. Ainz looked at the empty skylight. Joan watched him and felt the same cold fact again. He was building a life here. Not a friendly life, a controlled one. But it was a life. And the world wasn't going to let him build it in peace. Later, when the others left, Ainz remained alone in the warehouse. He stood before a clean desk he had formed from stone and metal with a wave of his hand. On it sat a single object, the orb, the anchor focal point. It was quiet now, dark, still. Ainz stared at it without blinking. He lifted his hand and called the quest board again, not for the team, for himself. Personal quest. Objective: confirm status of Nazarick. Objective: prevent hostile acquisition. Objective: maintain stability in current world. He stared at the first line the longest. In his mind, there was no warm ache. There was a heavy, quiet absence. Ainz had learned how to live with that absence. But this world kept pushing him into choices that made the absence louder. He lowered his hand. For a moment, the warehouse was silent. Then the orb pulsed once. Ainz's red eyes narrowed. It pulsed again. A thin, dark red line rose from it and vanished into the air like a whisper sent outward. Ainz did not move. He simply watched. And then, somewhere far away, something answered. Not with a voice, with a presence. Ainz felt it like a weight on the edge of his awareness. It was not the Shadow King. This was different, more distant, more familiar. Ainz stood perfectly still. Then, very softly, he spoke to the empty air. Found you, he said. Or more truthfully, found something. The next day, the world did not calm down. It never did. But the X-Men had one small new advantage. The battlefield had shifted. Orcus could not just point at the mansion now and say, They are hiding him in a school. Ainz was no longer inside their home. He was beside their world, a separate tower on the edge of the storm. And that changed the story, even if only a little. Scott sat in Xavier's office that evening, tired down to the bone. Xavier listened quietly as Scott explained the neutral base, the protocols, the new routine. When Scott finished, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. I don't trust him, Scott admitted, but I think he's trying in his own way not to crush everything. Xavier nodded slowly. Ainz is a ruler. He will always think like one. Scott stared at the floor. And rulers always want more control. Xavier's voice was gentle. Not always. Sometimes they want safety. Sometimes they want to stop losing people. Scott looked up. Do you think he can change? Xavier paused. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know this. If we treat him like a weapon, we teach him to be a weapon. Scott exhaled. And Orcus is trying to do exactly that. Xavier nodded. Yes. Outside the window, students walked across the lawn in small groups, laughing about something normal. Homework, a silly video, a snack. Scott watched them and felt his chest tighten. They deserved normal. They deserved boring. But boring was rare for mutants. And now, in the same world where children practiced flying and lasers in a hidden school, a skeleton king was writing quest boards in an abandoned warehouse. That was their new reality. Scott stood up. "We'll keep the alliance," he said. "We'll keep the rules, and we'll keep contingency plans." Xavier looked up at him. "That is wise." Scott hesitated at the door. "Charles," he said quietly. "He's searching for something. His people, his home, whatever it is. He got a response." Xavier's face stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. "Did he tell you?" Scott shook his head. "No." Hank picked up a pulse, and Jean felt a shift. Xavier nodded slowly. "Then we prepare." Scott swallowed. "For what?" Xavier looked out at the night sky. "For the next arrival," he said. In the warehouse, Ainz stood alone again. He did not pretend to sleep. He did not need to. He watched the orb like a guard watching a door. He wrote one final line on his quest board. Epilogue. Note: this world resists control through fear. It can be guided through structure and limited displays of force. Then he paused. He added another line beneath it, smaller than the rest. Unexpected variable. Some protect others, even when they are afraid. Ainz stared at that sentence longer than he needed to. He remembered the shelter children, eyes wide, holding on to his simple rule. Stay behind cover. He remembered Storm's hands shaking slightly after holding back lightning so no one burned. He remembered Scott's voice, sharp with fear, still trying to choose the least harmful option. He remembered Logan stepping between an angry crowd and scared kids, even when the crowd hated him. Those things did not fit neatly into Ainz's old world logic. They were messy, and yet they were steady in a different way. Ainz looked at the dark ceiling. He did not feel hope the way Xavier did, but he felt something like interest, something like purpose. The orb pulsed again, a quiet reminder that something had answered his call. Ainz turned his skull toward it and spoke one last time, very softly, like he was making a vow to himself. "This world will not break under my feet," he said. "Not if I can prevent it." Outside, the city lights flickered in the distance. Life continued. But now, somewhere in the shadows between fear and power, a new figure stood watch. Not as an X-Man, not as an Orcus asset, not as Magneto's banner, as something harder to name. And that was exactly why the future had changed.